when I joined the police in Manchester 31 years ago, I hadn't gone to school with anybody who was black. I'd been to school with one lad who was Asian, Indian, and my first interaction largely with black people was as a young officer in Cheltenham and Manchester. And there are styles, there's culture, there are things like that, and I think particularly with a lot of young people, and I think this is amplified with a lot of young people, there's this kind of occasionally in white people's eyes, police officers' eyes, this merging between gangs, young people, sometimes young people from black communities, culture, appearance, music, all that blends together. I think sometimes we don't understand other people and cultures and how they behave, and we react defensively. There's a bit of a male dimension in this as well, and that and I say this as a younger cop, that police officers are there sometimes to put control on things. We can sometimes feel the need to ever so slightly over control things, sometimes too much, and I think particularly between younger male police officers and younger guys who we're dealing with, there can be this little bit of a testosterone fueled relationship, and it's about who kind of wins off. So, for the young person to win off and kind of talk the police down, I kind of win a bit of face with people. As a cop, I don't want to lose face with the public servant, so we've got the power. So there's a male dimension. I think the way the young girl described her interactions and what she sees going on with male members of family interactions, I think there's a tricky dimension there. And there's something about, it's really interesting, I think, some of the stuff we've been doing in use of force has been looking at some of the dynamics between our male and female officers. So in some debate we've had, when the ACC said this was her experience as a young officer, that she might be dealing perfectly well with the confrontation as she would with a young man. And yet a male officer might feel the need to step in and jump in and take control. So there's something a bit male in this thing. When I first searched somebody, I was probably more nervous than they were. And I was probably more uncomfortable than they were. I haven't searched anybody, well, I've searched about 2 people this year, but when I was a cop and I was searching my 100th person, I didn't really think about it quite as much. And yet, it's quite a violation of your liberty to be searched. And we forget what it's like. So we don't notice our power sometimes, and I think that's one of the things. I think it does make me very sad, the reactions about how young people make us feel, because they are, everybody joins the police because they believe in justice, and everybody joins the policing because they want to make a difference. And we know that a lot of the young people we're talking about are in some of the most vulnerable communities. You've done loads of stuff in Hillfields. It's one of the kind of, they're some of the most youngest people. There should be people who feel protected by us. And I always think it's really sad when you listen to those videos about how people see us. It's really frustrating. So they were my reactions. And
is that as an individual or as the chief of police?
Oh, well, it's both, isn't it? Because they've opened up to you about how they feel. They live in that neighbourhood. I feel sad at personal level to feel that way. I feel sad because there's actually loads of great cops who go out and put themselves at risk and, want to do things and are very human about what they want to do. And I think, the interactions they've had that are negative have drowned out the positives. But I think there's something important about having pride in the organisation, and there's something about identity that's quite important in policing, because, to my analogy, you've seen the stuff in terror attack. We ask our people sometimes to bond together and go and run into really dangerous situations. And so if we aren't able to generate a sense of pride, a sense of camaraderie, then that's really hard to go and do difficult and dangerous and frightening things. And I think about things that I'll have done as a cop when I wore this uniform, that if I wasn't wearing this uniform, I'd think, hell, I'm a bit more frightened. So we drive things out of that. But there is a downside to that. This is the whole debate, isn't it, around, is police a closed culture? Do these bring things together? Because by bonding and driving people against a mission, sometimes that can also create identities where if we're being attacked, then we get defensive. So I think it's a complex gig. The other thing I'd say with cops, and I think sometimes we might think cops might behave in a way that we might find societally unacceptable, and sometimes we do. There's a very high profile case, isn't there, in London of this recently. But we also need to remember, I think, for a lot of frontline cops, they see and are traumatised a lot. We now know these days, don't we, that probably PTSD is higher among police officers than the soldiers, because they constantly face trauma. And so some of the behaviours I think we can see that are less patient, more direct, more kind of confrontational, are probably, we would say, as a result of actually we have a workforce that deals with scenarios where they suffer trauma regularly. And that's really tricky, I think. That's a tricky thing, because we want the police to go to dangerous, difficult places. We want the police to confront challenging things. We want the police to, go through the door of that firearms warrant in a way that, could face extreme danger. But then we want them to flip and be totally humane at the same time. And I think it is right and proper society expects that from its police. But I think actually we'd recognise for individual officers, that's actually a huge